Welcome to the Saturday in Athens podcast. I'm your host, Seth Saunders. It is my, let's say, second favorite weekend of the year. Cocktail party will always hold first, but SEC title weekend is my favorite. And it is not SEC championship weekend if we don't have our good buddy Chris Marler on the show. Chris, good to see you, brother.
Yeah, you too, man. It's been too long.
Too long. Well, mercifully, I'm talking to you about it this year, and the Crimson Tide are not in this game,
Yeah.
which takes my nerves down a little bit. I mean, not
Right.
fully, but certainly better. Obviously, second matchup this weekend between the Dogs and the Horns. First and foremost, where are you sitting on this? What's your gut telling you about how things are going to go tomorrow afternoon?
It's hard to beat a team twice. Like, it's very hard to beat a team twice. I've seen stuff like Graham Coffey has been unusually pessimistic this year, which is weird to me because he's like the most optimistic person in the world usually. But he was like talking about, like if you might face him again, like how much of like the playbook are you really going to open up and all that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Here's where I sit with Texas, and it's not a very popular opinion, especially with their fan base. I mean, I'm sure saw the video I did before the first Texas game because It feels like there's just times when you look at Kirby Smart and what he has and he knows what he has, and it's like, man, y'all are walking into something you really can't fathom. Like that 2022 Tennessee game, the 2024 Texas game, it just felt like it was like y'all really, like a hornet's nest doesn't really do it justice to say,
Mm-hmm.
but it was, that game played out exactly like I thought it would. It was actually way more dominant than I thought it would because you guys only allowed like 52 yards of offense in the first half. I think that when I look at what Georgia is going to want to do, one, like y'all, like Texas got y'all when Carson was at his like arguably his worst, like when he started in that whole thing where it's 12 interceptions over 6 weeks and like just couldn't figure it out and kept making all these bad decisions. Dude, he's gotten 12 touchdowns, no interceptions over the last 3 games. And, like that's the kind of like role you want to see him on going into the postseason. There's not a better coach in America in general. There's not a better team that's going to like be more, I think, prepared. But the thing with Texas is that I just don't think they've played anybody. Like I just, I was impressed with the College Station, the win in College Station. I really was. The defense is really, really good. But like going into that game, they played 7 SEC games. One was a loss to y'all where they got their, like, y'all beat the brakes off of them on their home field. And then the other 6 wins, the 6 wins going into last week were against teams that were ranked in the bottom 7 of the SEC standings. 3 of the 6 were against backup quarterbacks. So I just don't, like, at this point of the season, like, if you haven't been tested, I don't trust you. And to be honest, man, it's like kind of why I thought like in 2021 Bama might have a chance, or in 2023 Bama might have a chance against Georgia, because it's like, I know that you've played some teams. I don't know if you've played a team like this, and that's exactly what I think Texas is walking into.
Yeah, I'm kind of on board with that. I think Texas, and I feel that way, obviously, because of how it looked in October in Austin, is because you go, wait a minute, this seems to be the only matchup they had all year where the Jimmies and Joes were equal.
Right.
And you kind of saw what happened. I think their roster, obviously, there's depth enough and talent enough where most fields they're going to walk on. And, yeah, they should win the football game just purely on a talent perspective.
Right.
I'll tell you what surprised me about the first matchup, man, and I'm interested to get your opinion on this because you experienced it firsthand when Sark was calling plays in Tuscaloosa. Like, dude, for me, he is one of the, if not the most brilliant play callers in all of college football. Okay. The things he does pre-snap, the way he schemes things, he is excellent. And I was surprised at the lack of that in Austin. I thought they were going to use pre-snap eye candy a lot more, especially given what Georgia has put on tape this year, where, man, their eye discipline has been horrendous.
Yeah.
And so I'm interested to see if there's a flip in that. I don't know if it was chicken or egg, right? Like, I don't know if that was a game plan thing or if it was the pass rush became what it was and Quinn just couldn't go through the progressions. I don't know, okay? I'm not smart enough to know that. But I think that'll be different this time. I will say, too, that if we're talking about the 2 quarterbacks they have on the roster, I much prefer to see Quinn tomorrow than I do Arch, because the thing that has been Kirby's kryptonite, not just in Athens, but in his career, has been a guy where you have to put 11 hats on 11 hats. And really with Quinn, you don't have to do that. And so I just think it changes what they can scheme defensively. But look, man, if you're a Georgia fan and you've been watching all year, this is the most schizophrenic Georgia team I can remember since probably Kirby's first year. They don't seem to have an identity that they can lock into each week, other than, I guess you could say, being resilient, right? I mean, they certainly don't quit, and I will 100% give them that. But it's just hard to caption what they're going to be, how they're going to be at 4 o'clock tomorrow afternoon. Yeah. I want to go back to something you said because it's interesting. Everybody keeps talking about, well, Carson Beck's going to have to play great for them to win tomorrow night. I'm like, well, he threw 3 picks, had no touchdowns, and averaged like 4 yards an attempt. The first game they won by 15. Like they got Rube Baker, Carson Beck before he got the Playboys, and so like he seems to be Rube Baker post Playboys now. And I hope we're still in that phase. I mean, tell me that, brother. He had the yips for real.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm just tell me all that. Give me your opinion on the Sark deal and how that works out, and then give me your opinion on kind of Carson and where he sits and what he has to put on the board tomorrow.
So going back to the Sark thing first, I think Sark is the best offensive mind in all of football. Him and Lane Kiffin, and I think Ryan Day is probably a third. And before anyone rolls their eyes at the Ryan Day thing, let's not forget what happened in Atlanta on New Year's Eve 2 years ago. Like you may think he's an idiot because he can't beat Michigan. Totally get that, but he's a very good offensive mind.
Yep.
And the play calling, all that kind of stuff. The thing with Sark that he does, him and Lane especially, do better than anyone else in the country. They figure out ways to scheme things for their best players. One of the things that impressed me about Lane was when he was at Bama, especially, was, he was there for 3 years. I tell this story all the time. Lane did this thing when he came in. They asked him to be an offensive analyst going into the Sugar Bowl after the kick six, and he's like watching tape, and it's Nussmeier, who's the OC at the time, and they just lose the kick six game, so they cost him a natty or going a trip to the natty, and he puts up 5 numbers on this whiteboard, and it was like 2, 4, 9, 27, and 88. And it was like O.J. Howard, Derrick Henry, T.J. Yeldon, Amari Cooper, and DeAndre White. And they were like, these are your best players. Give them the ball. It's very simple. Like, it's very simple. There's a reason why I know Arian Smith has a lot of targets and drops so far this season. There's a reason why you go to him all the time. He's your best offensive weapon. Like he's one of your best offensive weapons. The reason why 19 got so many targets at when you had all these other receivers, including Ladd McConkey and some of these other guys over the past couple of years, like he's your best offensive weapon. Sark does the same thing. What Sark does more than Lane in that same capacity is that he will do all this pre-snap motion to get your eyes going every which way and all the window dressing and all that kind of stuff to throw you off. That doesn't worry me a ton. I didn't understand why they didn't use it more, like you said in the first game. I think going into that game, or maybe it was afterwards, but like Texas averaged like 58.3% of their plays had some sort of pre-snap motion that was second only to Florida. And we saw this Georgia team struggle with Florida, for a lot of that game. So I do think you'll see more of it. I do think, listen, I was on yesterday on Sirius with Alyssa Lang and Aaron Murray, and I almost said this when they asked about it, but I was like, I don't want to sound like a total idiot. Like, I'm fine with sounding like an idiot most of the time, but like, I don't want to sound like a moron here. But just hear me out, because then after I was done, Andy Staples did a whole article about it. I was like, okay, so I'm not an idiot. Like, I think that you're going to see some sort of 2006 Tebow version with Arch Manning tomorrow. And I don't think you're going to see Arch Manning line up at 4th and 1, bulldoze his way for a 3-yard gain like Tebow did. I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is Arch Manning is the better athlete. Quinn Ewers is, can we just be honest? Like, he's not that good. Like, he's just not that good. I'm
on board with that. I am.
Dude, like, I'm talking about a top 6 all-time recruit in the history of recruiting, and everyone's like, I can't figure out how he's this pedestrian. But when you have Arch Manning and you can have like the legs part of it, I think the thing you have to avoid the most, it's something that has plagued Ewers, is you cannot have turnovers inside of either 20. Yep. Either 20. Like, turnovers are going to kill you in this game anyway. It's what cost Georgia the game ultimately last year with the Carson Beck fumble at like the 15. Like, like if you fumble going into the red zone and it cost you points, like points are going to be at a premium with these two defenses. I think you're going to see Arch come in towards the goal line. Side note, if you're betting, anytime touchdown with Arch is a very good bet. but you're going to see him run like RPO stuff, and he also obviously is clearly like a good passer as well. I think you're going to see him involved in that. Going back to the final part, I think, of the question, which was Carson, is I think you hit the nail on the head, man. I thought about this yesterday because all these people like Carson Beck's going to have to do this, and it's like, no, he's not. And like trying to think of a way to make this not political. But it's the only example I can think of right now.
Let it rip, brother.
People freaking out about the election and being like, this is all the world's going to end. And it's like, you've already seen it before. Like, we're all going to be okay. We're all going to be fine. Like, you've already seen this whole thing with Carson being at his worst. Mm-hmm. Like, I don't think he has to be at his best. I will tell you the thing that fires me up more than anything is you saw the tight ends get involved way more in the Georgia Tech game. I love that because you've got weapons there that just have to be tapped. Like I don't know if that's like a volume force feed situation where it's like you guys are targeting them in double digits so they can get going. But whatever it is, you figure it out. Nate Frazier is going to be a problem in this league for several years. I love that kid. Yeah. I don't know how much running room you're going to get against this Texas defense because they are really good. But the other last part I'll say on the soapbox is the thing that always fired me up most about those Kirby speeches was Kirby. I forgot which one it was, but in one of his pregame tirades, I think it was the SEC championship game in 2022, and he made this comment, and he's like, it's about eye disciplines, blah blah blah. You see the right things, shit's easy. And it was like him saying that is one of the craziest things I've ever heard in my life because it's not easy. It's very hard. Yeah. But like in his mind, it's just like you boil it down to like the most basic thing. This Georgia team, I still believe, is capable of making a run to the national championship. I don't think that Texas is that good. I really don't. And I think you're about to get a Kirby Smart, like laser-focused team. And the last part of it that no one else wants to talk about is, dude, this team's somehow getting healthy. Yeah. Like most teams are all beat up. Texas is missing their left tackle. You got all these other, like Bama's like decimated in the secondary. Like some of these other teams that might make the playoff because Bama apparently might make the playoff. Ridiculous. But I just this team is still getting healthy. And if you can see them at full strength, I think that's also going to be a huge problem. I think it's the longest answer I've ever had.
No, it hit everything that I wanted to hit, and I'm so glad you bring up the Arch Manning point because I was driving in the car this morning thinking to myself, does Sark have the nads to be like Saban and pull what Saban would do? Because that's what Saban would do. He would do it because it's the most matchup effective, and wouldn't think twice about it. And so I always thought that was the difference maker with him, man. He just had balls the size of Alabama. Like
it'd be great. From this too, and I'm like, this is something that does me no good to say, but I'll say it. We all know that place is a house of horrors for Georgia. Like it has not been a very friendly place at times there. Like the Natty is in Atlanta. Mm-hmm. When you line up for whatever reason, I don't know what it is. I've picked Kirby to beat Bama every single time they face each other, like the last 5 times, or 4 times, like. When you line up on Saturday, like you're not going to see that Alabama helmet. Like you're not going to see Saban or Kalen DeBoer. Like all those ghosts, all those ghosts you've been scared of, they're gone. Like I think the one thing that I hope Georgia does is not what Graham Coffey said. And I love him to death, but I hope they come out there and, excuse my language, but fucking let it rip, man.
Yeah.
Like come out there and let it rip. Like this is, you have everything in front of you. Like go remind the rest of the country, like you are still the standard and you still are the best program. And that whole fucking national championship chase, that runs through Athens still. So like I that part is something we haven't seen from this Georgia team except for that weekend in Texas. Mm-hmm. And I hope that we get to see it again.
I'm glad you bring that up. And this is the last thing I want to ask you is about the standard, because my read on this Georgia team has been, and this has been different from the last few years is, and I think this was what was so amazing and has been amazing about the Alabama run and everything under Saban was the constant there other than him was the standard. And that regardless of all else, regardless of the coaching staff, regardless of our roster, we will honor the standard at all times. And I think when you are as good as they were and you're taking the best hit every week and every game that somebody plays against you is their Super Bowl, That's harder than it sounds, right? To
Yeah.
constantly get up, to constantly be amped. And for the first time in a while, it's felt to me like Georgia has suffered from that this year, where we're just going to play to the opponent. I mean, it's been like that every week. I would say the only thing that probably flies in the face of that was the game in Tuscaloosa. Like, I still can't wrap my brain around how in a game of that magnitude you come out and lay like a Tyrannosaurus Rex egg in the first half. Like, unbelievable. I still can't get past it.
But, we got out coached in the first half. It was very bizarre because it was
man. It was crazy.
And to be also fair, at halftime, I don't know what happened. It was like a case of like the Monstars from Space Jam because whatever Bama hasn't been the same since.
Yeah. Yeah, it's just but I'm curious, do you think, given now that every game from here on out is bright lights, that you see, because they have seemed in those scenarios, whether it's Tennessee, whether it's Texas, those were the two best performances all year. But to your point, even the Texas game, right? The offense wasn't great. I don't know that we've seen a opening kickoff to final whistle.
You haven't.
Full
Clemson.
From which one?
Clemson.
Well, even first half though, what'd they score? 6 points? I mean,
that was one thing that was interesting too. Is like in the beginning of the year, Georgia was like this second half team where it was like, we're just going to play with our food, or at least we just know what we have in the second half. And I remember, I mean, that would be like my best bets for like Bama, Georgia. I was like, you hammer the Georgia over in the second half. Cause it was like, I want to say minus a half point. And they were in the total points scored was like 13 and a half. And I was like, cause like up until that point against Power 4 opponents, they were scoring 81% of their points in the second half. Like the only game where they came out and like, you know, world beaters was that FCS or FBA or Group of 5 team, whoever it was that they played in between Clemson and everyone else. I think you're right about the Clemson thing, so I get that part. The standard part of it, you have not seen a start to finish domination, and you might not the rest of the season because these are all like really good teams you're going to face from here on out. I just will maintain until I see something else that this team is still capable of so much more, and it hasn't had to matter until now. Last year and in 2021, you had to dominate the entire season because the strength of schedule, like you played some guys last year, like there were tough games, like Ole Miss at home, Tennessee on the road was, I mean, they were 8-4, but still like the Ole Miss game at home, and there was another one. I don't know if it's
Mizzou.
Yes, but outside of that, you didn't have a ton on that schedule.
Yep.
That you were going to be able to have like any wiggle room with a committee if you lost, which is, you know, and especially in the way the season played out with like all these like teams that were kind of this log jam in the top 8, like whatever. This year, you know, like you can afford to lose 2 games. You can't afford to lose Tennessee. And what happened? They win by 14. You know, they put up 31 points on a Tennessee team that was one of 4 teams, including them, over the last 25 years that hadn't allowed more than 20 points in a game, like for like the first 10 games of the season. And by the way, to be clear on that, because people just kind of, we expect so much from Georgia, so like we don't think about this stuff. Like the Tennessee, come with me on this. The Tennessee game, that was their 10th game of the season. Through 9 games, no one scored over 20 points.
Yep.
In the last 20 or 25 years in the SEC, only 3 teams had done that, allowed no teams over 20 points. It was 2011 Bama, which statistically is the greatest defense of all time, 2016 Bama, which is the greatest Bama defense I've ever seen in my lifetime, and in 2021 Georgia, which is also considered one of the greatest defenses of all time. That's the era that Tennessee was in.
Yep.
Georgia put up 31. Like, you can't, that stuff like that goes unnoticed and not talked about a lot because we just expect so much from Georgia. The other thing I'll say too is, and this goes back to the whole being tested thing, is probably better phrasing than that. There's probably better phrasing than getting tested. But like the whole thing with Georgia versus Texas, especially, I already told you Texas had the weakest strength of schedule all season in the SEC, which is like 32nd, which I still think is a joke. But like, their opponents haven't been over, like I think they're under 500 like cumulative opponent record all season long. Georgia played 5 games against top 20 opponents. 4 of the 5 were not in Sanford Stadium. Like, you know, they've gotten some night games this year in Sanford Stadium. That's great. I know fans have been wanting to see that forever. I bet at some point it's got to be tiresome to have so many. Like no one else played a schedule like that. We thought Florida was going to. No one else played a schedule like that. And I think that when you look at this Georgia team, like to get through what they just got through, 4 or 5 teams in the top 20 and 4 of them away from home. And you're talking about potential ACC champion in Clemson. You're talking about a potential SEC champion in Texas. They beat them by a combined 46 points. Tennessee is going to be in the playoff. You beat them by 14. I know what happened in Tuscaloosa. I know what you're a Julian Humphrey TikTok star away from if Harris is in there, that play might not even happen. Yeah. But like, and then the other thing with Ole Miss, you got your ass kicked by Ole Miss. We're not used to seeing it, but it happens. So like, I think that going into the rest of the year now, like you have everything in front of you, and I just until someone else knocks them off, I have to think that this is the best. And I'll tell you what, man. Even if they lose on Saturday, you still got to prove it to me in the playoff that Kirby Smart is going to get beat by somebody when he's got more than a week to prepare, because I think he's like 16-0 or something like that in games like that. Like I will not stop believing in Kirby Smart until someone gives me a reason not to, and that hasn't happened yet. So
yeah, and look, man, for them it's obviously not Jimmy's and Joe's problem. It's not roster. It's just they got to put the pieces together, man, and they got to figure out how to play cohesively. And I think they're figuring that out. And I think the big piece of it, probably, especially come this time of year, man, they ain't nobody more battle tested than them. And I don't just mean schedule wise. I mean like being in bad situations in games and having to figure something out. Yeah. I mean, they've done it multiple times. So they won't see anything in December and January that they haven't faced this season. So it's going to be fascinating, man. Well, look, give me this before you go. We get out of here today. Give me your winner. Give me your final score.
I'm going to say Georgia 24-16.
24-16. I like that. So the Dogs play great defense again and come out as SEC champs. I would love to see it. I'd be happy to see some confetti about 8 o'clock tomorrow night.
Yeah, I hear you.
Well, look, Chris, it's always good to see you, brother. Tell everybody how they can support you and follow you.
Yeah, man. I appreciate it. It's good to see you again. Covering all SEC stuff for ESPN and Baton Rouge, and then doing Locked On Gamecocks, and then also covering Bama for Next Round Live over there in Birmingham. So just kind of all over the place. I would tell you where to find me on Twitter, but don't. Just don't. We're fine. We're fine. I'll talk to you soon, man.
All right, buddy. Good seeing you.
See you, bro.
All right, bye.